Good morning and welcome back to the second part of the program. I want to start by picking up on some of the issues that were raised this morning through the discussion and through the questions. And I want to go back to the issue, the overarching issue that all of our distinguished speakers this morning alluded to and spoke very clearly to. The aspect of the primacy, the supremacy of international human rights norms. But one aspect that we are yet to speak of is the fact that these international human rights norms are universal and that they are not limited to any one part of the world or to one region. The supremacy of human rights, the primacy of human rights, are due to the fact that these rights are universal. All of the 192 countries of the United Nations have ratified the convention except for 6 countries. So the universality of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women is non-negotiable. And these rights are not only, as Mushira and Fatima stated, part of an irreducible minimum of human rights, they are non-derogable. And non-derogable means that they cannot be diluted. And that's really why this corpus of women's human rights are not up to be negotiated. They are universal human rights guarantees that once they are enshrined in a national constitution or in a national legislation, become part of the enabling national landscape of human rights norms. Another question that came up was the whole issue of culture, the balancing of culture and international human rights norms, and how international human rights norms can impact, affect, and change culture. Now, Article 5 of the CEDAW speaks to that. And it is the first time that an international human rights guarantee or framework speaks to changing cultural norms and cultural, religious, and social stereotypes that negatively impact women. So international human rights norms cannot be ignored in the battle to change culture, social norms, and to bring social norms, religious principles in compliance with international human rights guarantees. A third point that was raised just at the end was the whole issue of economic rights. And economic empowerment is a very important human right principle. So they're not separate. Just as much as women's rights are human rights, economic guarantees are human rights guarantees. And social, economic, and political and cultural rights are part of a holistic framework, a holistic corpus of human rights guarantees. So you cannot truncate these rights. You cannot in any way de-link the inextricably interlinked nature of civil and political rights and social, economic, and cultural rights. And the CEDAW is the first framework that actually spoke to the holistic nature of human rights. You know, we have the ICCPR, the ICSCR, and the CEDAW brings them together and speaks to that holistic nature of human rights guarantees. So I just wanted to speak to some of those 3 important pillars because they are overarching principles that will be woven throughout this discussion. What I want to also now look at is the ways in which in the MENA region, and I think this cuts across all of the countries that that our distinguished speakers come from and speak to, is the way in which human rights guarantees, even when they are enshrined in the Constitution, are diluted and are subject to be minimized. So, for example, the third draft of the Tunisian concept states very clearly that international human rights guarantees and the framework will apply only so far as they do not violate the traditional and social norms and the religious principles of the country. And we see that very clearly stated in Algeria. And I'm going to turn to my distinguished panelists to speak to this. So the Algerian government too declared that under Article 2 of the CEDAW, this article will apply only so far as it does not conflict with the provisions of the Algerian family law. Now, Article 2 is the very heart, the very pith and substance of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, because it is the anti-discrimination clause. This is an overarching principle. If you in any way dilute that principle, you're, in other words, completely nullifying the power and the potential of these human rights guarantees to have impact on women and on all citizens. So what I would like to do is to start by asking our distinguished panelist, Kahina, and you have her impressive resume before all of you, to speak to the ways in which Algeria, although it has removed some of the reservations, removed the reservation on even the citizenship. Article 9 of the CEDAW still states that under certain circumstances, women who marry non-citizens, their children will be considered citizens only if the father is unknown or stateless. So once again, you're diluting even the removal of the reservation. So I wanted to speak of the way in which this kind of creeping Islamization, creeping fundamentalism is still an underlay, even when on the surface there is a change of rhetoric.
Thank you, Rangita. Good morning, everybody. Before starting, I would like, first of all, to thank very much Hele and Rangita here, and also the Wilson Center for giving me this opportunity to share with you some of the experience on women's rights about Algeria, my mother country. Before answering to your question, I will just state that Algeria known through the history very powerful women, whether during the Crusade, where my name came from, Kahina, which was a Berber queen there, and then during the French Revolution, Fatma Soumer, which was also one of the warrior and strong women who fought against the French colonies, and also many others that was part of the revolution. However, the women, and up to date, even during this uprisal, Arab Spring, and as Mushira said earlier, we don't know how to call it because we don't know which season we're going to put in it there. Women assume during those revolutions that we go together in the street claiming same rights. Now we want to get rid of dictatorship, we want to get rid of failing regimes, calling for democracy, calling for accountability in our government. So basically, we don't need to claim women's rights. We're claiming human rights and transparency. But unfortunately, after the revolutions or after any war, those rights or women's rights are put aside. And that started right after the end of any revolution, because women are confined and put back in their kitchen, where men take the lead in negotiating for rights, and basically men's right. And in our region, it's even dangerous, because we know that we are all aware that our country is trying, every time it comes to question to women, to emphasize the Sharia law. And we are all aware how introduction of a Sharia provision in MENA constitution will basically lead into undermining our legal rights and our legal weight as women. For instance, if I give you just a small example like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Pakistan, in case of rape, the victim is obliged to present 4 witnesses. And if she fails in presenting 4 witnesses, she will be the one, the claim returns against her, and she will be the one facing adultery, and therefore very often stoned and killed because of that. So basically, you see here the big gap in the law between when it comes to women's rights. And now we see the speeches of the new elected government, whether it's in Egypt or in Tunisia, they keep emphasizing about the importance of Sharia. Personally, I'm not someone who would go on a path to ask to introduce a Sharia or to interpret the Sharia. I am keeping that a Sharia as a religion separated totally from the state, and make sure our constitutions in our country should be totally divided about Sharia. I'm not going to argue about any religion. I would just keep it aside as a faith, but then go and move with the rule of law, and the constitution should be the ground to would preserve every citizen right. I mean, in Algeria, we lived since the independence in 62 until 1984 under a civil code. So basically, there were no family code. Our parents, my parents, for over 45 years were married under the civil code. I mean, they live happily, they respect each other, and they even love each other, which can happen in the Arab world. So basically, after the 1984, they introduced the family code. And the family code was, once again, as you're saying, Rangita, was inspired by these reservations provided into the CEDAW convention. Because we go and ratify a convention by putting reservation on very important and key aspects. As an Algerian citizen or as an Algerian woman, I am guaranteed access to education. I'm guaranteed access to work. I have the guarantee to access to the same salary and even position, powerful position, and even access to health, security, and everything. But then when it comes to the family, I would be considered as a half citizen. I have the right, thankfully, compared to other countries, have a right to apply for a divorce if needed. But then, in terms of inheritance, nationality, I will be just considered as not having this right to access to those CEDAW provisions. When you talk about the article 2 and among the 19 countries that ratified the CEDAW Convention in the MENA region, I mean, we always see that the article that are having reservation are the following: the Article 2, the Article 15, the Article 16, and the Article 9 and 29. Well, the Article 2 would speak, that Rangita just mentioned, which is basically also shows the country's obligation and duties on elimination of all form of discrimination in the country. Then Article 9, which is giving the rights for women to acquire, change, and retain a nationality, but also transmit that to your children. For equality before the law is what is guaranteed on the Article 15, which is the right to enter into a contract, with Article to own property, and the Article to choose a residence. Article 16, and that's the most important because it's touch base on a family and a marriage, and everybody wants to have a control on your family and your marriage. And the Article 29 also refers into dispute between state and argument around any difficulties to interpret any of the articles. So these are what I call the countries that our countries, MENA countries, or Algeria, that ratified the CEDAW Convention and put those reservation. I call that fraud, because they present a convention, but then, on the meantime, they have and they give themselves the right to put a reservation on a major key article. So basically, these reservation will become as a main obstacle in terms of implementing the law, internal law, that would, of course, part of the obligation of the member state. At the end of the day, you have the ratification, which is done. We all look perfect and very democratic on the international arena because we ratified the convention. But then, when it comes to the implementation, we do not show any result. So the women remain, and will be at the same level unless we manage women with the help of the state, of the civil society and NGOs to fight and make the state accountable in terms of bringing accurate reports regarding the result achieved on the ground in terms of women's rights. Because when you go to the UN and you go per country to follow the hearings, it's amazing. It's amazing how this moved absolutely fantastically, and you think that you're moving to those countries, in fact, because they are so democratic. One last thing, it's I would like to mention the lifting of reservation on the Article 9, which is about the nationality. We have to understand the background. I mean, the lifting of the nationality, the reservation on citizenship and giving the nationality, was actually done in a very specific timing, and that was during the Gaza bombing. Because there was Algerian women married to Palestinian stuck in Gaza that went to reach out at the embassy, and those women were of course allowed to go inside the embassy without their children or husband because they are not Algerian. So there was a huge movement back home through different NGOs, and that's obliged the president between a night and day to just sign the lifting of this reservation and provide and give the right to those women to indeed give the nationality, transmit it to the kids, and therefore allow them to leave the country and be secured and fly back to Algeria. But then once again, when the reservation were lifted, the implementation and the change in the article, in the code, in the nationality code, still pending. So I think I will just stop here and we can continue through the debate. Thank you.
Kahina, that was a very powerful presentation. I just want to highlight two statements that you made, because those are also cross-cutting statements. You spoke of the importance of strengthening the rule of law. You also spoke about the accountability of the state. State accountability is key. So what does the rule of law entail? A cornerstone of the rule of law is the independence of the judiciary, state accountability, and a strong corpus of human rights guarantees. So what we are speaking of is really at the heart of a rule of law. And accountability, state accountability, calls for these human rights guarantees to go from rhetoric to actual practice. And how do we practice? How do we implement or enforce human rights norms? Because as we spoke of in the morning, we have these guarantees enshrined in most of our constitutions. They are imperfect, but they are still there. They are in our legislation. How do we then enforce them, make those guarantees real? And that's where this conversation really leads to. What are the concrete steps to take to the enforcement of human rights norms to make them real? And that's why, there were those questions earlier in the morning. Why are we talking about human rights guarantees when it's more important to change culture, when it's more important to change social norms? But the way in which we change those social norms, the culture, is by enforcing human rights norms. Culture is something that's dynamic. It is not immutable. It is constantly evolving. And the way in which it evolves and changes is through the enforcement of human rights guarantees. And the fact that women's rights are enforceable takes them away from the realm of charity. You know, these are not charity that we are asking for when we are asking for our civil and political rights or economic rights. This is not a benefit. This is not a favor that we are asking of the state. These are rights that then can be enforced in a court of law. And to make them enforceable in a court of law, it is not enough to limit them to the realm of rhetoric, but as activists, as practitioners, as lawyers, as scholars, when we draft these laws in the Constitution or in enabling legislation, we need to make sure that those enforcement principles are also part of that legislative enactment. It is not enough to make these sweeping, broad statements on anti-discrimination. How do we make those equality guarantees real? And that is why you need to make sure that those institutions and enforcement mechanisms and principles are also written into the law. And that's really the next step in our conversation, as well as the next step for the MENA region. So on that note, I turn to a very dear friend and a very dear colleague, Dr. Iman Hussein, who's also a lawmaker in Jordan, who's done a lot as a trainer, as an inspirational role model to bring more women to leadership positions, to bring more women into the political arena. And Dr. Iman, I also want you to follow up from Kahina's very powerful presentation and speak to the ways in which, I know you're going to give us a broad overview, but also I wanted to focus on the reservations to Article 9 of the CEDAW, but how the nationality law of Jordan does not grant Jordanian women the right to pass on her nationality to her children, even though Article 9 of the law states the children of a Jordanian shall be Jordanian wherever they are born. So does that mean that women are not Jordanian, that they are not full citizens? So that's really the anomaly and the ambiguity and the paradox of this language.
Thank you. I want to start as an academist, as an activist too, who has the honor to live and to be raised in a tribal, patriarchal, and environment. I was raised by a mother who lost her husband when she was still in her 20s. And she was, and is still, my role model. So when we talk about the barriers that women face in my country, my mom faced and I witnessed. This made me understand that there are barriers and there will be. But now, can we live and overcome them? These barriers are cultural, economical, political, legislative, and religious. Economical and cultural barriers. I will use my mom also and myself as an example. My mom had the right to work, and I do. She didn't have a fair pay, but I do. My mom was the breadwinner because of her situation as a widow with 6 kids. And if God forbid something happened to her, we would not be able to get our education. Because kids were and still unable to get mom's retirement. My mom was married at 13, and I was married at 18. And my daughters were married when they are more than 23 years old after they graduate. Although I was able to travel by myself, and I always do without the need of my husband's approval. But that was the case years ago. And that goes along with CEDAW. And Article 15, when the reservation and the government were lifted a couple of years ago. Another cultural barrier is the concept of the land. Some men still believe that women cannot inherit a land because it means an owner. So the land will go to the other families, the name of other family. It means that the woman, she doesn't carry the name of the family, and she's less, half citizen, as we said. Women still worry that they wouldn't not be able to inherit the lands because land in Jordan still like an owner, and it should stay and inherited within the same family and tribe. If we talk about religious barrier, unfortunately, the main reason for the barrier is the misinterpretation of religion. As an example, women are threatened to be abandoned by their husband because they think that they have a green light for second and the third and the fourth marriage. And I will give you a very recent and real example. It happened, weeks ago in Al-Mafraq, which is a city that took the hardest hit from the Syrian crisis and was overwhelmed by influx of Syrian refugees. A mother-in-law was threatening her daughter-in-law that she can get her son, a Syrian wife, more beautiful and less cost. And I mean costless. This scenario, in addition to being humiliating and intimidating, it is emotionally stressful for many women in the area. Also, the Syrian refugees threatening women in many, for economical and secure lives too. Another example about the misinterpretation of religion is inheritance. Right. People believe that women can inherit half of what men do in all cases, but actually it is one of 23 cases, which means sometimes women can, prevent a male relative from inheritance. Legislative barrier. Also, men still have the exclusive right to divorce, talaq their wives, without providing any legal reason. And that compromises and threatens family, security and well-being, and above all, in most cases, kids. Another example of legislative barrier is marriage age. And, we changed the law, and now it is 18. However, the judge can lower that to 15 if he anticipates that this is for her good. Yeah. Honor crimes is another example of poor legislation and poor interpretation of religion. Killers for honor used to be punished by average 6 to 12 months only. Due to mitigating circumstances, and boys who carry the honor of executing, and usually they ask the boys who's younger than 18, so they will not go to jail. They go only to let us say for the places or to take care or to rehabilitation centers for the young boys. And if we talk about now, of course, there is a reduction, penalty. There is a change in the law, but about the reduction penalty, it's become to 7 to 12 years, and even the Article 98 and 340 of the Penal Code have not been removed yet. Political barriers. Since 1974, women have granted to be, granted by a royal decree the right to vote and to run to the parliamentarian election, and in 1982 to municipality election. And again, it was by the power of a royal decree. Having said that, a political empowerment started, a way ahead of the first date, and still has a lot to achieve. And the first woman reached the parliament was Circassian. We call it Circassian, yeah. A Circassian woman by a Circassian quota, not by a quota. Circassian, yeah, by Circassian quota, not by a quota, woman quota, because we try different ways to have a woman quota, but only by a royal decree too. We had a quota in 203, and now we have for 6 ladies, 6 women, 6 seats reserved for women, and now we have 18 women as MPs, which 15 won using the quota seats and 3 without it. And this indicator of the change that happened in our society. When we talk about, the empowerment of women, we consider that the success in the parliament was resonated by similar success in the municipality through appointing 1990 women in different municipalities, and it was in 1995. But now there is a change in the law that we have 25% in municipality law, for seats for women. And it's worth noting that our Jordanian ambassador here in Washington, D.C., is a woman. And the first Arab country to appoint a woman ambassador in Washington, D.C. is Jordan. Was Jordan, yeah. Actually, in Jordan, we believe that there are 2 theories to transcend barriers. First theory, political will, which is limited. And as example, it's limited, the changing of the Constitution, Article 6. And also, we have, since this decade, after 2000, we have from 0 to 3 or 4 ministers were appointed. For example, in this cabinet, we have only 1 woman, and the last one, no women were appointed. Like in 19, we have the first woman appointed in the cabinet was 1979. So we are back to 1979. Also about CEDAW reservation on Article 9, Paragraph 2, and Article 16, Paragraph 1, C, D, and G. And also to sign a protocol on harmonized CEDAW articles in the national legislation. Even CEDAW with its reservation were published in a formal gazette. I like to give an example of the effort that the women did to overcome the barriers, some barriers, and we still have more. Women's movement has been lobbying for the protection and the promotion of their rights, focusing on violence against women, in particular honor crime, personal status law, and women quota. Awareness program, lectures, training, conventions took place across the country. Launching networks, especially from outside Amman, to strengthen women's capacity and strategic outreach, and strengthen their political participation at municipal level. Campaigns lobbied the parliament and members of the government through petitions, collecting signatures, and organizing sit-ins. Women quota at the parliamentary level and judicial institute regulation that induced now 15% in the, for the female judges. And the first judge appointed in 1996. Also, at the nationwide campaigns were launched to lift the 2 remaining reservations on CEDAW. A list of demands were presented to the parliament by Jordanian National Commission. It's newly, this demand, we submitted to the parliament newly, which is, for the CEDAW reservation and for the changing of many laws. Dialogues with all levels of decision makers, especially local decision makers, because we believe that the most effective campaigns is when the grassroots lobbying. Yet, these years, all of us witness the power of the grassroots. No wonder that the cover page of Time magazine was dedicated to the people's power in the street, referring to the Arab Spring and similar movement across the globe. Finally, allow me here to extend to you and through you my sincere appreciation and gratitude to effort dedicated in this conference and other activities sponsored by Wilson Center and what it stands for. Thank you, Hale. Thank you, Rangita. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Iman, for that very, very interesting presentation. You spoke of a couple of very interesting issues. One was, and I want to hear about it more during the question and answer period, the ways in which women are mobilizing around changing Article 6 of the Jordanian Constitution. The language as it stands provides an anti-discrimination clause that only covers race and not gender. So the effort is now to introduce gender, to include gender as a prohibited category of discrimination. And it's because of the struggle and the fight by women that is now being raised to the surface, and it has become one of those really a clarion call for action. And I want to hear more from you during the Q&A session. You also spoke about the importance of grassroots, mobilizing and galvanizing, but I also want to go back to the whole question of enforcement of women's rights guarantees and other human rights guarantees. And now when we talk of the CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, as was pointed out earlier in the day, it is just one of the core 7 human rights principles and conventions. And today's discussions are about the human rights norms. Of course, the CEDAW is central to women, but the CEDAW committee makes it a point to highlight the important ways in which the other human rights conventions mutually reinforce the CEDAW, and the ways in which the CEDAW cannot be privileged in a vacuum. It has to be seen within that context of the other 7 human rights treaties, as well as the UN Security Council resolutions 1325 and 1820. But going back again to being pragmatic and practical about the enforcement of those rights, women are central. They are the watchdogs, they are the bulwark and the vanguard of guarding those human rights. But what about when human rights principles, guarantees are violated? Can these women go to courts to enforce those rights? Can women, despite the fact that most of the countries in the MENA region are yet to ratify the optional protocols, which call for individual complaints to the CEDAW committee, what are the mechanisms to first go to courts, second to mobilize the international mechanisms in their favor? But those questions we can come to later. I just wanted to highlight them coming out of your presentation. Now I want to go to our third panelist from Yemen, Fahima, who is going to speak about, once again, a general overview, but also focus on 2 major issues which she will highlight and which are really at the crux of some of the human rights violations against women, the ways in which women, in order to gain identity cards or apply for passports, have to get their guardian's consent. Additionally, if a woman, the penal code, did you have a question? Okay. If the penal code allows for mitigation of a penalty for a man who kills his wife if he finds her in an adulterous relationship. So the ways in which the criminal code discriminates against women, violates core human rights principles. And so she will speak to both those issues and a larger framework of women's human rights in Yemen.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Hala, thank you, Regenta and Wilson Center for having me again here. Before we sort out the problem with the computer, so talking about obtaining your ID or passport in Yemen, how is it problematic and challenging for Yemeni women? I will tell you my personal story. So to start with, the first time I obtained my ID, it was with my dad, and also my first passport, it was with my dad. At that time, I was not aware that I had a right. I have a right to obtain my IDs or official papers without, presence of my dad or my brother. So once I know, I really went that time to to renew my passport, and I was armed with the knowledge about equality, my constitutional rights, and everything. So it's when I met the officer there, he told me, "Where is your dad? Are you married first?" I said, "No." He said, "Where is your dad or your brother?" I said, "No, the constitution actually doesn't,
Doesn't call
I
for
was
it.
really excited, and I told him, I don't need their presence. I'm going to obtain, according to the constitution, to obtain my ID without their presence. He said, "No, no, no, who told you?" I said, I read the constitution. He said, "Okay, maybe not in the constitution, it might be in the Quran." I said, "Really?" And he was telling me, you understand me, my sister, you have to understand me. Many girls run away from their families, they travel without their approval, and it's going to cause us a problem. I said, but we are equal, it was a long discussion, and in the end I was telling him, "Okay, I'm going to write this in the newspaper." I was a journalist at that time. He said, "Okay, to avoid, we don't want such a fuss, we can solve it internally, so I will make you exception and you can get your passport this time." And this is, even just every day it is a concern of our Yemeni women, girls, friends. They are really suffering from the same thing. You have to take your younger brother to obtain your ID or passport. So it's let's go to the presentation.
That was such a powerful story, Fahima. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Really,
When I raised the issue, I didn't realize you had a story to back up that issue.
when she told me about the issue, it was one of the closest issue to my heart, because I went through, a troubled time. So it's, I think yes, Sandra. So as you know, Yemen actually, I'm very proud to say that Yemen has signed and ratified more than 61 international conventions and treaties. We are really fast in signing those treaties. This is really very common, because we don't actually know the consequences or the commitment that we are obliged and we are going to be accountable for. So, and interestingly, I think Yemen, one of the first countries in Arab region that ratified the convention in 1984. So, with the reservations, unlike the other Arabic countries, Yemen doesn't have reservations towards gender or equality or anything. It has just one reservation, about disputes and settlements.
29.
I'm sure at that time they didn't know that, there was no strong women movement. They don't know that we are going to, one time they are going to be accountable for, and to commit to such ratifications and such international convention. So it's, but I have to say something here about Yemen. Before 1991, Yemen was two Yemens, and women, in the south, I'm not from the south, but women in the south were enjoying, a great, especially regarding to personal status law, they were enjoying a lot of rights comparing to now. And after 1991, women really, especially from the south, who have witnessed revelations in women's rights, they are, until now, so far, they are crying over losing such, rights. So this is, yes, we government Yemen. This is according to the human rights national reports. There is general success, we cannot deny, in incorporating human rights obligations in domestic laws and regulations. We have really, women's rights, especially for us in the north of Yemen, we have seen advancement, regarding to different issues. But still, we have done those advancement, but still they are not inclusive, they are not complete, and they are not according to desired results. So because, for example, we have women strategy, national strategy for women development. We have women departments in some ministries, but those departments or women departments in the ministries, they lack for budget, and they are excluded from in the planning and in the policies. They are like just names, they are like a decor, and they are not given the attention, and they are not effective as okay. So we have managed as women and campaigns and working with UN in general, we have managed to modify and change different discriminative laws. In the few years we have submitted to the cabinet around 40 discriminative laws in our constitution, regarding to the nationality, regarding to different for example, especially for family status law, we have modified them, but not all of them are approved, especially the child marriage, one of the hot issues that we are debating on. In the parliament, it reached to the parliament where the law or the laws are stuck. They cannot approved, especially by the conservatives there. And now we are in the transitional period where we are going to draft any constitutions like other Arab countries, and we are hoping to have this quota 30% of women, 30% for women, and also to have to set a minimum age for marriage as 18. But it seems, from following up, the results and the discussions in the national dialogue, that after which we are going to have a committee to draft a constitution, it seems that things are not promising, to be honest. There are people who are against to have quota. For example, there is the Supreme in the in the March, actually it was on the Women National International Day. There was a big harsh statement issued by the Supreme Committee for Religious Scholars. They attacked, the International Amnesty, UN system in general, for having a workshop about integrating gender in curriculum. Mm-hmm. The attack was harsh. As my colleagues in the morning said, their understanding, they have never read a CEDAW, and they don't know what CEDAW is. What they think or thoughts about the CEDAW, it means they say it is about homosexuality, about sodomy, about immoral. If you read the statement and the words they have used, it is really, there is a hostility, and there is sometimes it comes from women, and women, I see sometimes women are the enemies of women's rights themselves. So it's we have done a lot, but we are still, it is I think a gradual steps in this regard. So it's for example, here Yemen's domestic laws and constitution provides considerable legal protection of human rights despite shortcomings. But as I told you, legal harmonization doesn't guarantee implementation. This is our problem in everything. We have spoken about the role of law, and I think we need in Arab countries, not just in Yemen, we have to implement, enforce the law, the role of law and justice. If we manage to implement such thing, I think we are going to go far away. And for example, equality before law, as I told you from my personal story, we are not, even the constitution I mean, states that we are equal citizens, but we have still these complementary, and women are siblings or sisters of men and everything. That, I mean, vague sentences or vague statements that, I mean, make us as women not half citizen or second citizen or just creatures in the eyes of those ones who have drafted this constitution. So, I mean, in Yemen, to be honest, I mean, no, we are not equal before law at all. I mean, in adultery or the penal code, it's very important, and it is really one of the most discriminative laws. As Regenta mentioned before, in Yemen, if a husband finds his wife in a relationship or in affairs or in adulterous relationship, he has a right actually to kill her immediately at that time. I mean, without being sentences, I mean, anything. I mean, he could spend 1 month or 2 months in the prison. But if the woman finds her husband in adulterous in the same situation and she kills him, she is sentenced to death sentence, and she is, I mean, it is very discriminative. And there are many research and many interviews with some female prisoners who have the same problem. I mean, in Yemen, it is an honor to kill, I mean, a woman in such position, but it is not an honor for her to kill him. So we are half citizen, and what is right for the man, it is not right for women. So in general, I mean, if we come to CEDAW implementation, we have this CEDAW phobia, as I told you in the statement of religious scholars in Yemen and Tunis and Egypt as well. Early marriage is still has been causing a phobia for the conservative societies and the people in Yemen especially. And every day, I mean, we have been hearing in the media, and some youngsters, I mean, some 9 years old, some 10 years old, 11 years old, I mean, they are divorced. And maybe you have followed the story of Nujud, who divorced her husband, who is 30 years old or more. So I think early marriage is still very sensitive, I mean, in our culture. Reproductive health and family planning is also, you know, a sensitive thing. So everything, gender equality, GBV, personal status law, women political participation, those are considered as a Western thing, and they are going to destroy our society. And to wrap up, I mean, in Yemen, if you are going to change or to make a change in Yemen, I mean, we have to change the mindsets of the people. I mean, they have to understand this concept. I mean, this is one of the recent survey has been made in Yemen, and it has been found out there is a lack of knowledge on human rights in Yemen society, and they are blurry. Even the women themselves, when they say what are, for example, the important rights that you think that should be taken care of, I mean, they didn't mention the rights. Even the children's rights came in the bottom list. So it's this is the challenging for all of us, especially Yemen. So I mean, there is, to be honest, there is no friendly, I mean, agenda or towards women issues. Political insecurity, food insecurity, poverty, all these social, economic has a negative and huge impact on women issues. So women issues become not a priority for the society, for the government. So they are really less and less. And illiteracy and education. We have spoken about the education. I think it is very important to enforce compulsory education for women. Opportunities, as we spoke in the morning, we have media, the role of the media and UN system. I don't agree with my colleague Mushira. She said about the failure of the UN. I think UN is doing a great job, but really, despite that challenging, and we are working with community-based organizations, with religious people, so I think it's not a failure at all. And I have to say in general, it is challenging. With this in the screen, just few things about the challenges we are facing in Yemen. it's horrible. I mean, and we have a lot of work to do. So just I would like to know to emphasize about one thing: how women are the enemies of the women. In the national dialogue, we all the women are calling for quota 30%. One of the members in the national dialogue are Salafis from conservative parties, and one of them stood up and she said, why you are asking for 30%, because she was defining the agenda of her party. She said, of course, I mean, we don't need 30% because we are equal in Islam, so don't ask for such quota. You are influenced by the West. And one of the ladies, she said, okay, come on, my sister, you are right. We are, I mean, equal in Islam, so we should call for 50-50. And the woman was really surprised. Thank you.
Fahima. Fahima, you have just endorsed our clarion call, the Women in Public Service Project's clarion call, 50 by 50. 50% women in all levels of public service, in government, in politics, by the year 2050. But Yemen has taken the lead. You want to work towards ensuring that much earlier than 2050. So you've just joined our program and we have joined yours. Fahima, you also taught us a new phrase, cedophobia. I love that phrase. It's a very interesting phrase, and you told us this morning it's a fraud. This is the ways in which that the human rights conventions are being translated into constitutional making in the MENA region can be called a fraud. I love those two phrases, and I want to speak a little more about what all of you spoke about, the need for enforcement, the need for implementation, and underlying all of that, the bedrock of all of that is the need for education. Now, I want to, Mushra Khattab is here, and when I think of the apotheosis of translation of international human rights norms into national legislation, I think of her work, on her powerful work on the children's law in Egypt. The ways in which she reformed the children's law was such a masterpiece of modeling the ways in which international human rights norms can be transformed and translated into national lawmaking, and the astute and strategic way in which she went about, step by step, building block by block this corpus of children's law. And one of the ways in which she did was also to change, the ways in which fathers would become engaged in preventing child marriage, in preventing genital mutilation, the ways in which religious hierarchies could become powerful allies in that struggle, the ways in which the curriculum reform could be shaped in a way that would be an incentive for children to go to school and to help their parents in the field. So the ways in which she changed not just the curriculum, but the timing and the terms, the school terms in the school year, so that they would be consistent with the needs of the families, but also with strict guarantees of the right to education of the child, so that that would not be diluted, that would be given primacy and supremacy. So human rights education is at the core. How do we then integrate CEDAW so that it doesn't become what you call CEDAW-phobic to the new generation, to the emerging new generation, so that they have the tools, these powerful tools that they can use to implement these laws, and the awareness, how can we integrate that into the curriculum, but so that it's not in an ad hoc way, that it's really given prominence in laws. So, in some of the efforts that I have been engaged in, whether it's in India or Vietnam or China, in drafting gender equality laws or anti-violence against women law, that need for education is enshrined in the law, so that you can actually take it to court, the violation of it can be, and it can be enforced. So that's my first question, because this program is really a pragmatic next steps. What are the next steps? How can we secure women's rights in the MENA region, especially this panel? So how can we look at education as a powerful tool to secure human rights? Yes, and I'd like each one of you. Yes.
Okay, I'll
You're
start.
the educator, so I would want you to start.
Okay. You know, about education, in the morning, one of the ladies, she said about the economic, barrier, and she is right. But if we go to education, there is a percentage. If more educated women, it means more women can work. But in Jordan, we have high percentage of education. For example, 62% in the universities are women, and almost 98% enrollment, the percentage of the enrollment to the high school. Of course, there is a difference between the rural areas and in the urban areas. But even so, though, we found that the employment in Jordan, women, it's only 14.5%, which is very low. How do we change the cultural and not the cultural, I mean the social barriers we face and the bad tradition? It's not only by amending the curriculum, because it was really important. The stereotype of the woman, that in the mind that woman, she cannot go in the parliament. Woman cannot be a doctor. This is long time ago. It's not long time ago, because if we say that 20 years ago, that woman, she only can work as a teacher. But now, after we change the curriculum, we keep always looking at the curriculum to change it, because women used to only go to the kitchen, and the man is going to work, and the man reading the newspaper, and woman, she's cleaning. After that, there is amendment happened to the curriculum. But what did they do? They, the woman, she cook, and the girl, she moved the scarf, of course, and she, the girl helped her woman to help her mother to bring the juice to her brother. So it means that we have the stereotypes of the where women should be, not as an activist, not as a lawyer, even though that we have a lot of changes, happened to women. I want, if you allow me.
Can we just go
and go back
and
to
then we
other?
come back?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but for more educated women, it means more development of the country.
The subject of education is of course a key subject, especially when you see Fatima shared earlier the data about illiteracy in the region. But then I would go and specify on education. I mean, we don't have education issue in Algeria, or at least since the independence. Since '62, education became mandatory, and the government at that point introduced a wonderful rule which was not just promoting education, but then give allocations to parents that send their both sex children to the school. So basically, if you have 10 kids, you don't have to choose who's going to school, because more you have, more you send to school, and more money you get. So that's really promoted education and reinforced that after early 60s. But then the problem was, as Iman was just mentioning, was the curriculum. The stereotypes win within the education books. You go and you open a first year school books for the first year, for the 5 to 10 years books, and you are going to just see how it is the family is stereotyped in a way that shows the father is at work, the mother is in the kitchen, the brother is going to school, and the sister is playing in the playground at the best case scenario, or helping her mother. So this is where I mean psychologically you are promoting the image, and you promote growing up of a kid by this separation, because you put each one in a different background and in different framework. And this was going on for now over 50 years, and there was a lot of work done in order to review the education curriculum. But then the education is just so I mean there is no real political willingness into changing that, because that would basically promote into westernization of the society. Because if you go at a higher level, i.e. universities or high school, and as Jordan, I mean the data are magnificent. I mean more than 60% of scholars are women attending universities and high schools. Judges are 47%, 60% of lawyers are women, more than 80% teachers are women, doctors are 44% or things like that, and we have 17% among the judiciary are female who are working at the Supreme Court level. And this is a very important number if you try to project yourself in a project on talking about the independence of the judiciary and developing of a rule of law. So once again, I think it's very important to emphasize into the education, and especially to the countries that are under reform. But the education alone is not enough unless you make sure you take the right path in terms of putting equality, civil rights, and international human rights as the basics in the education curriculum.
Now, you raised two very important issues, although you didn't connect it. The ways in which education and political rights and women's leadership are often interlinked. And Secretary Clinton raised this yesterday when she referred to the case study in India, where there is now evidence-based research that in villages and in communities where women are concentrated in village councils as leaders, fathers tend to retain their daughters longer in schools because they see more possibilities for their daughters. So the linkage between women's leadership, role models, and the intergenerational impact on younger children. So I think that is such a powerful nexus. So thank you so much for bringing that. When you speak about, women in the judiciary, women in science, women in political leadership, that is not a powerful, impactful force in and of itself, but it has this enormously transformative intergenerational force and power, and that can never be reduced or in any way diluted. So I would like to ask Fahima, you're the one who raised the whole issue of education in a very kind of impactful manner. So what I would like to do is to look at ways in which we can change these stereotypes using CEDAW. Article 5 of the CEDAW calls for dismantling of stereotypes, cultural and social stereotypes. But how can we also introduce human rights education into the curriculum so that women and men are educated, that boys are educated too?
Okay, I believe so much as in UN believes as well. I mean, the smartest investment is in girls' education. So this is, I think, the only investment we can do for human being. So, for example, I will tell you, I mean, the quality of education in Yemen, for example, and I believe so it is in the same in the other Arabic countries. Actually, they don't, or they lack for human rights in general. I mean, unlike here, if you compare, media and education, I mean, both the curriculum. I mean, the curriculum is reinforcing the stereotypes, the inequality between men and women. And I have the same example. I mean, the first textbook I have read until, I finished university, I have never known, to be honestly, I was not aware that I have a right so and so until I get involved with civic society, until I become a journalist, and I get to know. I read I read the constitution and the other human rights norms. So it is in a country like Yemen, for example, where illiteracy is shamefully among women. It's more than 70%, in rural areas, of course, where the majority of women population. So when the illiteracy is increases, their awareness about the human rights is decreases accordingly. So it's if these women are given, for example, a chance to get educated, to go to the school, and also the curriculum is, the gender is integrated in the curriculum, I think it is going to be beneficial for boys and girls at the same time, and they are going to respect each other. And I will tell you, for example, it is the perfect age to have these seeds of equality in the minds of boys and girls, because when they grow up, it's a bit difficult. So it's education. It is not just about. As I told you, I'm going to connect about the investment. If the girl is educated, she is going to know her rights, health rights. She is going to get more empowered. She knows her all her rights. For example, in Yemen, a woman who doesn't finish her school, she cannot take a decision to go to the nearest health center because she needs the permission of her husband to go to, even she is dying. That's why the maternal mortality, for example, is very high among Yemeni women. Yes, because she cannot take a decision. She is bound by her husband decision. So I think education gives a lot of empowerment in different sides and aspects for women. This is just, if you connected, if she's, for example, educated, she is going to have a family planning methods, for example. In Yemen, no. If my husband agrees to have the bills or the family planning, I'm going to use it. My husband is against the family planning, I'm not going to use it. And she is going to give multiple pregnancies, and she is going to subject herself to death. So it is really shame.
Thank you, Fahima. What a powerful example about the restrictions on the right to movement and its impact on the right to life. That was another issue that we should be talking about, the restriction on the right to movement. But now I'm going to open up for questions, and I know that Fatima is dying to make a comment. Is excited to comment.
Yeah, I just want to add, I have a comment and a question. The comment is that for education, another international instrument is the Millennium Development Goals. MDG number 3 is
and 2,
Equality.
exactly on women's education. And this is another tool that countries can use, our countries and other countries. It focuses on education and women's education at every level. And talking about education, when you take the paradox, if you will, the conundrum in Jordan about the higher education of women and the mismatch with the labor market participation, this is not only in Jordan. There are Saudi Arabia. Take Saudi Arabia. But the issue is that goes beyond that. Is there any matching between women's education and the market needs? That's the issue in planning. And my other question to Kahina is that regarding the Article 9 on nationality, you said something that triggered my attention. It is still pending. I would like you to expand on this issue, because if it has been signed, so what do you mean by pending? Thank you.
I just want to take a question from Dr. Isfandiari.
Regarding education, in Iran, 64% of the entering classes at universities are women. And the level of education across the board is over 90%. So we like Algeria in Iran, don't have a problem when it comes to education. But in recent years, two new developments have caught the attention of the Islamic Republic, which indirectly touches on the issue of religion. One is that educated women do not want to marry less educated men. So across the board, if you have more educated women graduating from universities, so you have more women who are not getting into marriage. The rate of divorce in Iran is roughly around 30%, and it usually happens within the first 2 years of marriage. This means that if there is an arranged marriage, the women walk out of their marriage. So the government suddenly decided in September, because just before the university started, that across the board, in 77 colleges and higher education institutions, women were barred from studying 35 different fields. But it was not the same across the board. For example, in the north of Tehran, a college would bar women from studying English literature. In the south of Tehran, the same college, the branch of that college, would allow women to come to this to study English, but they couldn't study engineering. And this became the law overnight. And women who were accepted to universities and to colleges were told they cannot come. That was the first decision, to try and reduce the level of education among women. The second thing was that, again, the Minister of Higher Education passed the law very quickly, barring access to higher education to women who did not live in the same city. In the past, if you were living in Tabriz, you could go to Tehran and study. This was also passed. And it happened so suddenly that there was no way that you could discuss it. The new president has promised to revisit this decision, but promise to revisit means it will take again a couple of years to be where we are. So that is a problem. Secondly, I think in countries where you have high level of unemployment, in our region, preference is given to men when it comes to employment because of this whole notion that men are breadwinners in the family, you know. So that is also a big problem, you know. It has not to do anything to do with qualification, but it is also with the culture. So now a question for Kahina. Algeria still has a president that goes back to the FLN, the War of Independence, whatever you call. And the Islamists won the elections, but they were barred from taking over. Let's say, hypothetical case, what will happen if the Islamic Bouteflika has to die one day, you know? if at all, yeah, but he has to go one day. But, and you know, the ministries will change, and if this, you know, if the Islamists win a majority in parliament, do you see a change in women's rights? Or is that so enshrined that it's not going to be touched?
Thank you. I will answer first to Fatima's question and come back to you, Hala. I mean, what I meant, but it's still pending. It's because of the implementation. I mean, after the decree was signed, the UN was informed by the lifting of the article, the reservation of the Article 9, and then there was 2 years later the reforms of the nationality law. So basically, it says that a woman has the right to give their nationality to their children and even the husband. But then when it comes into the practicality of how do you exercise that right, up to now, today, in the administrations, in a different administration, I mean, we're still fighting. So unless you are officially divorced and you get the decision by a judge to be the tutor of your own child, and if you're still married, you cannot. You can give eventually your nationality to your kid, but then you cannot exercise very basic rights for your child. Like you cannot help get this child to, you cannot open a bank account for your kid, for instance. You cannot travel with your kid without the authorization of the father, which goes in absolute opposition with the supremacy. And the thing is, for every case, I mean, we've been called for different NGOs. You've been called at the borders in the airport because a woman have been denied to go out of the country with her kid, with her child. So there is a disparity. So basically, it's the law, the implementation, and the reform is done. But then when it comes to the practicality, you still have to fight with a mindset. And this become a case and a day-to-day case. It's like going to the administration to have a passport for your kid. And they would say, what is the father? Well, the father is busy. Or the father, you know, if he's dead or divorced, then it's fine. But if he's alive and he's still there, then it's become it triggers the fact that he's the father and he has the power. So that's the disparity, and that's the daily challenge that's become just unbearable. And for Hala, like you touched base on one of my passionate, subject when it comes. I mean, we had the experience on the 90s where the Islamists, after a fair and transparent election, took over and get into the local elections. First of all, before getting into the parliament, and this is where they've been stopped. I do not trust them because I believe the first thing they will be reviewing is indeed the women's right. That's So, and they have been showing that. And when there was a reform end of 2012 with the reform of the election law introducing finally the 30% quota, they were the ones struggling to get women into their list. There was just a big fight because I know women that are activists or they are members of their political parties, and that was the biggest fight into getting women into the list. And they ended up just getting spouses, wives, girlfriends, whatever, and putting them in the back of the list to fill up the gap. So, I mean, there is no denial whatsoever then if they have to take over, they will be. Yeah, pray for his life.
I'm going to now I'm going to ask our wonderful audience to join in. Yes, you raised your hand first. Yes, and then you.
Hi, my name is Mariam. I'm an ordinary Iranian woman, but I'm not in this field, so maybe my question is a little bit different, but I'm very interested and I'm very thankful to all of you. I'm very happy as a Middle Eastern woman to see such an organization. My question is about, I haven't heard anything about this in the conversations, but I thought there is this Ukrainian organization, which is a very small movement that has started in Ukraine. It's called FEMA, and they are trying to, very ordinary women, actually young women, trying to get a message about feminism and women's rights. What are your thoughts on that? I think it might be a little controversial, but I thought it would be interesting to know, do you think these women and their movement is going to have any impact in the future of women, and especially in the because they have been very
do you want to answer?
Okay. Maybe coming from a conservative society in Yemen, I think you will be shocked because, you know, I'm always with the women movement and women activists. But I mean to choose the right mechanism. I mean, for example, being naked or being so covered doesn't help and serve women issues and women cause in general. So sometimes it does harm, I mean,
That's
the cause. So, I mean, for example, going to Middle East and I mean, like, yeah, going topless, I think it doesn't help. And it gives the chance for the opponents to attack women's rights. That's what I have noticed, I mean, through the social media and different media outlets.
Yeah. Can you keep? I wanted to hold your thought till we get the question from you, and then these two. We will take a group of questions, and then you can lump them together and answer. Yes.
Hi. First of all, thank you for the panel. My name is Adlan Sari from the Yale Journal of International Affairs. So I guess I have two mini questions and a full-size question. So my two mini questions are, the first one is on the topic of human trafficking. So oftentimes human trafficking doesn't pop up as a women's issue because it might not involve citizens. It could involve other people. But where do you think the role of international conventions and also just the efficacy of governance in one's own country affects this issue, which obviously disproportionately affects women? So first one's human trafficking. Second one was on the topic of education. Obviously, the content of education is very important, but a big crisis in the Middle East is the quality of education in general, just, you know, in educational institutions and higher education. So how do you think educational quality, especially of the university, affects women's rights? And then finally, the third thing has to do with the role of Islam. Obviously, Islamists, political Islamists, have been a challenge to women's rights in the present. And at the same time, demographically, Islam is still around. It's still an important force. And I think a deeper question is the relationship of Islam with not the state, but the modern state, the modern Weberian state, which is the marriage of Islam with a very strong kind of state capable of becoming a security state, a state that can go into privacy. It's a rather new phenomena. Traditionally, Islam has been the province of civil society, protecting rights against the state. And you know, Salafis are often described as conservative, but in some sense they're very liberal. They're a new thing, and they're a consequence of modernity and not of tradition. So how do you see Islam? Did you see Islam becoming the province of civil society once again? And if so, can that be a force for the protection of women?
Since those are very simple questions, I think we will first focus on those questions before we go to other questions. So who's brave enough to take
start
up
too?
that challenge? You want to start, Kahina?
Yeah,
And then, yeah.
I will go back also. I will just add something on about the FEMA point. I mean, as any other international women movement, I do totally respect what they do and sign any petition, like I signed for the petition to, because we have Amina, which basically waiting for her sentence, which can go up to 2 years imprisonment, unfortunately. But the problem we have here, talking about our region, is we are daily fighting as secular, fighting against this idea they are putting on the table of a westernization. So basically, if I am topless, I'm a Western, then I don't have any room within my society. So to what we're trying to talk here, we're talking women's rights within the concept and within the developed culture in our society. It's a patriarchal society, it's a very complicated society, it's a hypocrite society, and we have to deal with it. If I have to show them that I am westernized, then I have no room within this to be heard, at least. So, and that would hurt me more than anything else. So that's why I won't go topless, to say that. So, and talking, I mean, to answer to the 3 easy questions here, I mean, quality of education, I mentioned that that's the key. Education is definitely important, but then quality, and it goes back to the very first moment within the family. If you have an educated mother, that would definitely teach her children. They will grow up within have a more balanced life, and they would basically be the equality will be predominant in this family. I mean, going up into highest level of education and universities. I mean, the need of reform is all over, from the beginning until the end. And our region is suffering a lot from employment, and our region is obliged to face economic challenges, whether through the Millennium Development Goals, or to be sure to create, according to the World Bank, more than 20 million jobs within the next 3 decades. So these are questions that we have, the governments in place, have to tackle, whether they want it or not, rather than focusing on women's life, what we wear and how we're walking in the street. There are many challenges and issues they should face, rather than doing basically focusing on the discrimination and women's rights.
You want to you have a comment, Mashira?
Sure. Yes. You want to add on this? Yeah, please.
Well, I want to thank you very much for raising the issue of the quality of education, because I think this is the biggest challenge that our region faces, and it's actually ripping children of their rights when you say we have free education and you put over 100 child in one class, victims of a teacher, very ill paid, without any training, and what happens? The poor drop out of education. So we were talking about numbers. Fatima mentioned some numbers. You will be surprised that a big number of children enrolled officially in school don't go to school, and no attendance is taken. So this is the biggest violation of human rights, the quality of education, low quality of education. And it doesn't harm the rich, because the rich can always find an alternative. It harms the poor. So this is really where the political commitment is absent. It's, and I give an example of our constitution that says free childhood and motherhood services. How can you do that when you don't have the money? And why do you put it in the constitution to start with? The second point I want to touch about is Ali al-Mahdi, or there is another girl who stripped naked. And Lilia discussed this when we were in Morocco, that those girls, they are sick and tired of focusing on their body. Why? Why focus on the body of the woman? So they just wanted to send shock waves to the society and say, start treating me like a human being. Don't look at my body. Don't look if I am a male or a female. I am a human being entitled to rights. And coming from a conservative society, it's even more valid, because the objective is to send a shock. If someone here or in the West goes naked, it will not shock people, because people are not, no, really, because people don't have this fixation about the hair or the arm of a female. No, really, it's you want to shock the people. You're covering women and you're still harassing them. Some women are now walking all in black. You only see not only 2 eyes, sometimes 1 eye, sometimes even with a net on the eyes. I mean, this is ridiculous. And they're still sexually harassed. So this is a very important issue that we have to deal with. Thank you.
So Kahina would like some clarification about your question. Was it about, modernist interpretation of Islam and the impact on women? Is that the question?
Well, traditionally, so it's kind of an irony that Islamism has been married to politicalness. Traditionally, Islam was the province of civil society. It was oftentimes the scholars and everybody would align with civil society organizations, waqfs and endowments, and they would kind of almost harass the state. The state's not doing enough. The state's doing this wrong. Focus on economy. Don't focus on this area in civil society. So it's actually very strange. It's actually unintuitive that these days Islamism is political more so than societal. And I think intellectually the Islamist movements haven't really dealt with this issue. The modern Weberian state, we in the West, here in America, we have a hard time figuring out what that actually means. The Republicans and Democrats debate it all the time. but especially in the Muslim world, how do we deal, theologically, how do we deal with this new modern state that's able to pervade so deeply into society? It's not really been figured out on an intellectual level. And so it's kind of strange that Islamists have assumed that, yes, we need to become in this machinery of the state, but they haven't critiqued it from the point of view of the original province of civil society. This broke down also with the breakdown of the Ottoman Empire, when Abdul Hamid II started co-opting the ulama. And when you co-opt, you control. So first he brings the ulama into the state, then the state and the religion kind of become one. And this is a new phenomena.
Right. So we want to keep the focus on the impact on women. So, the impact of political Islam on women is probably what you'll get into, and probably your response should be. So I'm going to take a couple of other questions just in order to, I will take you, but Erika, did you have a question? And yeah. So Erika, you and you, the three of you. Yes.
Erika Weberita, Women's
So 4 more
Democracy Network. We're talking about women's rights. Could you please talk about women leaders, those in the region who are willing and able to take the challenge of taking that leadership role? And I'll tell you why. In the morning, Ms. Labidi spoke about the importance of initiatives to pass a law and implement a law coming from the people. However, very often, we don't know what we don't know. So the education aspect is very important. And it takes a leader to take that upon themselves, to say, we're implementing this. A leader and a role model, like you, Rangita, said. Role models like the president of Chile and then, the former UN women's head, like Secretary Clinton, who through the immense amount of work being the key foreign policy person, still took the women's issues at always, not at the back of her mind, but always at the front of her mind. So talk about these women. We may not necessarily know them, but they exist. We know you, and you're the leaders. But they're one step, probably the leaders are other leaders are one step up, willing to take that challenge to say, I'll run for the president. I'll be in the parliament. I'll take that challenge of campaigning and then implement that change. Thank you.
And I think we have a couple in the audience too whom we want them to seize that mantle of change in their countries. I just want to be very fair because I had some kind of a list. My question was already. Okay, good. You and then you. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Layla Magari, and this question is for Fahima. I'm very interested in what's been happening in the national dialogue in Yemen. And you touched on this a bit, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the focus on women's issues and on human rights issues in general, as well as to women's participation in general. And then I was also wondering, are you optimistic about the outcomes and the progress that's been made so far?
Hi, my name is Holly Connor. I'm a family planning programmer with Engender Health, and this question is for Fahima in your capacity at UNFPA in Yemen. I'm interested in the intersection of human rights and family planning programs, not only ensuring that family planning is available free of coercion and violence, but also that women ideally couples and everyone has access to a range of family planning methods in the context of reproductive rights, in the context of human rights. So as I'm sure you know in your capacity at UNFPA, last July at the London Summit on Family Planning, governments and donors came together and pledged significant financial commitments to reaching an additional 120 million new family planning users. So since then, we've seen public health experts and human rights experts coming together to sort of create a dialogue and ensure that rights are embedded in family planning programs going forward in the context of new goals and targets. So my two questions are, number one, can you speak to the status of reproductive rights in the human rights context in Yemen? And then also, UNFPA is an institution. Can you talk about how you're working in the context of the post-2015 MGG and FP 2020 context.
Right.
Thank you.
So this is the way we are going to handle these questions. Fahima, you will speak very quickly about the national dialogue, reproductive health rights, and the constitutional the ways in which the MDG goes, and the post 2015 agenda. But that's again I think a discussion for another day. So let's keep the MDGs out of this, because those are very important development tools, but I don't think we have the time to go have a real reasoned discussion. It would be a very surface discussion. So those two questions. And then I would like, Erica's question is a wonderful way to wrap up on women's leadership, and that will resonate beyond the four corners of this room. So I will ask both of you to weigh in on women's leadership. So Fahima, very quickly.
Okay, I will start with the national dialogue. Thanks for your interest in this important issue, because it is one of the crucial, moment Yemen has been going through. Yes, from the beginning, women participation in the uprising has encouraged them to be one of the components in the national dialogue. We have 9 components, youth and women. So women are one of the components participating in the national dialogue with the quota of 30%. It's close to 30%. All the parties were requested to submit their list with 30% quota. One of the parties, socialist parties, socialist party was the only one who submitted a full list of 30% quota, to be honest, unlike the other parties. Women are struggling in the national dialogue. Many of my friends are members either from the youth or either from the political parties or civic society. They are struggling to push women rights issues in the national dialogue, so it could be shaped later on in the new constitution of Yemen. Despite the fact there are many objection from the conservative members in the parliament, in the national dialogue. So it's I'm quite optimistic until the new constitution is drafted. At the moment, at this stage, I'm quite optimistic, but I don't know what is going to happen afterwards. If the women continue such a momentum, such energy in the national dialogue, I'm sure with their voices, with their strength, I think they are going to make a difference in New Yemen. Your question is really big, so we have to have a face-to-face conversation, but human rights approach is missing in Yemen, to be honest, not just in family planning. And as I was speaking in the beginning, a woman doesn't have a right to control, on her body. So it is one of the basic thing. Women in Yemen, they have this in their mentality. Women is one of the positions of men. So, for example, if you would like to get married, you don't have the right to choose your partner. So from the beginning until pregnancy, until labor, as I spoke, you don't have, they cannot take a decision to go to the hospital. And if you would like to go to a cesarean section, to have, for example, operation, you have to take a permission of your male guardian. So if he is absent, you are going to die, and you are not going to look after. So it's difficult, to be honest, as a UN agency working in this field. It is difficult to convince the people, the mindsets. Okay, it is the right of the women to decide and to choose the right family planning methods and everything. Regarding to the consultations. We have, as you see, the ICBD, or the International Conference for Development and Population.
I think we should leave that
for
a future discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Before I talk about the leaders, I want to talk about the marriage and education. In Jordan, is completely different. If the girl now want to marry, she has to be educated. Not highly education, but the most important thing to have a job, and constant job. So, or she will not marry at all. This is the problem. About no, not by the law. Of course, no. It's a choice. Yeah, of course, not a law. But this is, it's kind of violence. Yeah. About the leadership, Erika. I think Jordan. In each village, you will find a leader. It's not necessary to be in high position as a minister or as in appointed in or a parliament or. But you can't find really in Jordan. You go to each village, you can't find, and you met through as you know. I'm proud. I'm a WDN chapter in Jordan. You know that, and you know, for example, we have young girls who are really, you know, we say that if this one trained enough and she will be something in the future, because it's not only education, it's also skills. That yeah, so they need our help. We have in different levels, yeah, NGOs, schools, everywhere you find women leaders, but they need our help. And the woman, and this is the problem, I think, you know, when the woman sometimes, I don't know here how it happened, you know, become appointed in high position maker, she forgets that she is a woman, and this is a problem.
That's true.
Yeah, and we know that sometimes they appointed because they are women, because we you know, in Jordan or in Arab countries, you know, we sign agreements, and this is our problem, that we are in a lower because we don't have political participation. That's why they said we have minister, we have one and so, and we have 15%. And when these women come, they forget their responsibility towards women, and they are not real leaders. We cannot consider these women who are leaders. The real leader one who leads the others to come and take their place. Thank
Kahina?
you.
Thank you. I mean, about the leadership, one of the main issue that we have in the MENA is basically leadership, whether it's male or female. But when it talks about also this leadership, I mean, it's not, as Iman is saying, it's not somebody that leads and we see it, because of course we don't see that many women in our countries, you know, at the top level position, because they are not allowing access yet, even if they are sometime appointed and there is a political willingness to do that. But leadership are all over. I mean, you can find amazing youth leaders. I mean, I had the opportunity to with one of our programs to send some youth leaders to this mini UN panel that happens in Qatar. And when you go and you talk to this youth, I mean, they are between 20s and 25 years old, and you hear these people are very skillful and they are very well aware of the situation. Are they going to be promoted? That's another question. Whether they will be allowed to perform, that's another issue. And that's what exactly we are fighting about when you talk about the access and the human rights and the ability to have the equality into accessing in different position. And it's a process, but I do believe that it will be getting there sometime, as far as we never give up on what we already have in hand and make sure that we fight to gain more.
Thank you, Kahina.
Thank you.
So what we see now is an inflection point in the history of the Middle East, and we could not have thought of a more important turning point at which to have this conversation, the conversation on the impact, the potential and the promise of human rights to be transformative at this pivotal moment, at this history-making moment in the Middle East. And when Hale, my very, very cherished friend and colleague, envisioned this program, I don't think she even thought of how important this conversation would be to the events that are unfolding as we speak in the Middle East. And she is the chief architect of this program. I'm honored, and the Global Women's Leadership Initiative is honored to partner with both Hale and her staff in convening this conversation, in bringing together a group of friends and colleagues who have been not only pivotal to the history of women and women's leadership in the Middle East, but also pivotal to the history of women's leadership globally. So thank you very much to our distinguished panel, both this afternoon and earlier in the morning. And it has been such a pleasure to have all of you join in this conversation. Thank you very much to our staff who have worked so indefatigably to put this together, to the staff of the Middle East program, the interns who have brought so much energy to the program. We could not have done this without you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.